Welcome to Fireteam Chat, IGN's Destiny show. Thank you so much for joining us. Joining me today is Travis. Good to see you again.
McClunky. Hello. Hi, Destin.
Hi. And Paul Tassi. Paul, good to see you.
Yeah, you too, man.
Thank you for making the time. I know you were a very busy guy, and I appreciate you. You know what? I'm going to do your lower thirds one more time.
That makes me sound like an a-hole, but no, I'm never too busy for Fireteam Chat.
No. I didn't mean it like that at all. I'm just very happy that you have a busy life and you make time to do the show because I enjoy your company. Today, we're actually inspired by something you wrote. You wrote an article that pointed out that Bungie is looking for feedback from us. And I thought, we're recording a little bit earlier in the week. We don't really know what's going to happen in the TWID, so we can cover 2 of those next week. That'll give us a beefy episode. But I have wanted to give Bungie direct feedback, and they're listening, everybody. So let's tell them how we would imagine the game should change in a positive direction. Paul, why don't you start seeing the premise of the episode is based on your article?
So it started with a tweet of mine where I was like, yeah, Bungie's like in genie wish granting mode for all these things that players have wanted forever, like weapon on sunsetting and like a horde mode and like all, cross account power level. It's like this big list of stuff they've sort of been checking off in the last, 3-6 months, especially. So I tweeted that and then Cosmo retweeted it and he's like, hey, what else do you want to see on the list? So like, they want to continue to grant wishes. So I wrote an article like listing both kind of my personal ones and then some I kept hearing from the community. Are we doing 3 in a row? Or are we just going to do one? And
you do one, and we're going to go round robin style. This might be a shorter episode. I don't know if we're going to burn through these, but let's hear what you got.
Okay. My first one and my main one, by far, if we're, my last crusade was getting rid of blues, which did happen, is uncapping transmog and not selling transmog anymore. Just doing a normal transmog system where if you get a piece of armor, you can transmog it. If you want to charge me glimmer or something to do it for whatever reason, fine. But this idea of paid transmog has been utterly ridiculous since it was introduced. And it used to be like, okay, well, maybe if they just uncap the quests or whatever, that'll be a little better. Then you can grind it. But like, I've done so many of these freaking quests now. Like, I'm so tired of it. And it's either like running a million ritual activities or it's finding the quote easiest one, just like grinding elemental kills at Grasp of Avarice's loot cave or something. Like it's just give it to us. Like this is kind of on the par of consumable shaders, like something that they thought could be something, cosmetic-ish that can drive microtransactions, but like in actuality, it has just been this exhausting, very annoying system that's sort of like it's one of the worst transmog systems I've ever seen. I heard New World had a bad one, but like that's one of the only ones I hear that gets brought up. I think it's time. I think a lot of people agree with this. Like I posted that under Cosmo's tweet and like it got a bazillion likes. Like, so I think that's a pretty common sentiment. And so that's definitely one of my big ones at this point. And I've kind of been saying this to some extent or another since it launched paid, which I've never thought is a good idea. And I've never spent money on it. So,
I think one of the more positive things about Destiny 2 that I wouldn't really adjust too much would be how the gunplay feels within the game. I think a lot of that is really, really fun. And I'm using that as a jumping off point to talk about my wish for what Destiny would adjust. Now, I have long been critical of how they've handled vault space and inventory management. It's something about video games that I just find incredibly tedious and annoying. I feel like you just have all of these materials. A lot of them are useless or just unnecessary. And the big one, though, is weapons and armor. My pitch for how they should address this problem, and it's been a long-standing pitch, is something I would refer to as vault imprints. Basically, all of those assets for the roles and the everything, it's already in the engine. So I don't really understand why, from a resource within the game engine standpoint, why we can't just make an imprint of our perfect roles and put them in our collections. Maybe it's just because every player would need to have that. Maybe it's a Diablo issue where you would have to load everybody's inventory when they go into a public space. But I just don't get it. The game is 120 gigs. You're telling me you can't load the assets that everybody has to have access to, because it's already in your collections. All those roles are already detailed in your collection. So why can't I imprint my perfect role and get it out of my vault? Why does it have to be an inventory management system? Why has I can't think of a game that has done something like that, and I don't really understand why. So for me, my pitch to address the inventory space issue would be, just let me imprint my god rolls so I can pull out what I want and keep like the things I really love. It doesn't affect gameplay. It doesn't affect the loop in a negative way, because you still would be grinding for those god rolls. It's like, oh, I got my imprint for Mountaintop. Finally, I get to put that in my collection. And it's like checking the box. As a collector, like as a kid growing up, I would collect comics, and it's really cool to have like all of those things in one place. So like that is just something that I just don't understand why they've never addressed it, and why you can have 200 more slots. How is that a better solution? Like in terms of memory
management. Let me ask you, does crafting address any of that for you, considering that
it does a little bit?
You can have access to all the perks. If you want to change them, you pay a little bit, like whatever. I'm wondering if you think crafting is a good potential answer for that in terms of what it does.
It does. So just do that for all of the weapons. Like if I know that I can just collect and then craft the weapons, I think that was a good step in the right direction. But you still have, and now they're on sunsetting everything. So what about all the other pieces of gear? Why not just do all the weapons? Why would you limit what's available to us in terms of crafting? It doesn't make any sense to me. It's incredibly strange, and it just seems like an entire system that you either go all in on it or like change something up. So I do agree with you that system and the adjustments they've made, where you can extract the whatever it's called, pattern, as opposed to deleting the gun to extract it. I think that's a good correction. Now just do it for all the weapons if that's the solution. So that's my.
I kind of think it almost makes it worse though, right? From my view, Paul, because when you're crafting, you either have to hold on to your version that you've bothered to level up, or delete it and then start the like leveling again with the new version of the weapon you just crafted. So it almost makes like storage more of a thing, because it's like, all right, well,
but it's only one copy, right? Like,
I invested all of this time.
So you have your god roll, you have to delete that and make a piece of garbage and then grind it up. We talked about this when they first introduced the system on the show, I remember. And it's just a weird system. Why do I have to use a piece of garbage? Granted, they have given you ways to dump resources into that gun if you really wanted it and level it up faster. But it's just convoluted and
which was inevitable.
Tedious and annoying.
Don't get me wrong, I hate crafting.
Yeah,
but I just mean in terms of saving inventory space more generally, so you don't need like 7 almost perfect rolls. You can sort of just extract, and then you have one.
I love crafting, but I think it does make the vault space problem harder, which I don't have like most players. I don't have the vault space problem. It's probably like on the last thing on my list of complaints. But I will say, I've thought it's weird that the collection system essentially stopped being useless almost right after they introduced it, right?
Yeah.
Or it started being useless because, then they got rid of static rolls, and then the collection tab tells you can't regain any weapon that has random rolls, which means that you can't use the collection system for 90% of the weapons.
Yeah, they have like now 3 systems.
Yeah,
right?
It's just it is very weird and seems like they've got a bunch of competing philosophies, none of which like really gel together.
Pick one.
So you're just saying it would be like, okay, you have your god roll, you haven't used it in a while, maybe you just put it in collections to save the exact roll, and then you can take it out of collections as a saved roll whenever you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? And like that's you can great. Have like
that's a really basic good system. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have like the thing about Destiny is they need to add like 4 different frickin' materials that you need to grind, and it just feels like a game design philosophy that's rooted in getting the player to engage with the game more, as opposed to rewarding the player for having earned, like you've already had to earn the gun. Just let me. They're getting rid of legendary. What is happening with these systems? It's so weird to me.
That's one less.
I'm all for that. I'm all for that. Get rid of all the currencies, as far as I'm concerned.
So anyway, that's my big one. Figure out a system for vault imprints. If that is the pattern extraction system, whatever. I don't think it's perfect. I think that system could be improved. But now you have to do it for all the guns. Like, stop making me hold on to all these crap rolls. Don't make me use a garbage gun for like grinding it to level 20 or whatever, so then I can go make it again with the exact perks that I want. Like, it just seems so tedious and silly. That's my take. You're up, Travis.
Cool.
Sorry.
My first wish list item would be that I want Bungie to refocus on PvP in Destiny. And I say this as somebody who just now describes himself as a former PvP main. I was a PvP main in Destiny for most of my time playing it, but after a while they stopped really supporting PvP, and I found myself not really engaging with it as much as I was engaging with PvE. So I'm now, I guess, a retired Crucible guy. But I would love it if they would reinvest in that. And I know a lot of people in the Destiny community like to kind of poo-poo the PvP situation and say, oh, well, you know, Destiny's never really been a PvP game. To which I would agree. I mean, it's certainly not like a strong competitive PvP game. It's not a arena shooter or anything like that. However, I would argue that all the times Destiny has been in its best state has been because they've had a strong PvP environment to carry them through PvE droughts. And I think that when that happens, you don't have some of the anger and frustration from the community because they have this infinitely replayable content to engage with, and it sort of gives you a playground to experiment with all the great god rolls that you worked on grabbing, right? And so there's not really a place for that right now for me as a player who wants to get all my great loadout stuff and then bring them to bear against my fellow Guardian in some cool way and just like keep me invested. And for that reason, I look for my PvP experiences elsewhere and play a lot less Destiny. So whether it's maps or getting creative with game modes and just like trying new stuff, we rarely get new game modes introduced, and when we do, they're always like slight variations on existing modes that don't really mix things up. I'm talking like
Battle
Juggernaut,
Royale.
No, I mean, like, that's kind of crazy. That would be a huge investment. I'm talking like, like Halo has so many weird and interesting PvP modes, whether it's an infection mode or Juggernaut or what have you. And I feel like Destiny's always shied away from some of that over the top stuff, which seems weird, seeing as Destiny is a really over the top game with like silly stuff in it that you would expect them to get a little bit more creative with PvP. And so I'd like them to reinvest in that. I think it would be hugely helpful for the game, and it certainly would appeal to me as a guy who really likes playing PvP more. So it's number one on my list.
I used to love PvP. My favorite era of Destiny PvP was when it was the hand cannon sniper meta. And I was playing a little bit of Iron Banner last night because I don't have Tusk of the Boar. It was my first drop, so I was super happy because I can just keep getting curator rolls for that, or at least focus decrypt. Very generous mode where you get a cool gun, but I go in with my Thorn, not Beloved, whatever the new one is. Anyway, and it just doesn't really work because the powers have become such a important aspect of PvP that basically if somebody pops stasis, you're kind of screwed unless you happen to have the specific build that counters, the Warlock stasis ability, and it's frustrating.
Didn't they just make hardware, the no abilities mode that just came out?
I hate that.
I haven't tried it out yet.
Why do you hate it, Travis? When you were saying, I thought this would be something that was like a quote departure.
Yeah, so I think that is cool that they're trying new stuff. I'll never poo-poo that, but I will say it does not particularly appeal to me when you take away the one thing that makes Destiny and you try to make a PvP mode that feels like every other shooter. It's just for me, part of Destiny is the powers and the interplay. I think it needs tweaking and how much powers are influential and how quickly you can get your grenade back and stuff like that. Like I think people's gripe about like how frequently that is killing them are totally well founded, but it doesn't really appeal to me to like, oh yeah, it'd be fun is if I played a Guardian with absolutely no recognizable Guardian powers. That's just to me like the opposite direction of what I want.
Taylor.
That said, it also feels bad when you're playing what's the mode where you have your super constantly? I'm forgetting.
Imagine Halo with no like any pickup.
Yeah,
you can't do anything.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of like the Halo SWAT thing, right? Like people love SWAT, and I'm like, you mean Call of Duty? Like, I get that people like it because it changes things up, but it sort of erases a lot of the stuff that like is important in Halo arena shooter. And I would say that taking away Guardian powers is pretty much taking away all of the recognizable Destiny features. And so I just kind of want them to try interesting new stuff. We still have never seen like a 3-team mode or a 4-team mode where there's smaller teams and there's like inter-team fighting, and there's just so many possibilities. I mean, if you look at like other multiplayer games, like they really swing for the fences, and I feel like for some reason Destiny has always been afraid of that in their PvP, and they've played it really safe and made really small incremental adjustments. And I'd like to just see them go hog wild.
I hear that. I honestly don't know how they fix the PvP system. I feel like it's been kind of stagnant for too long. There's powers are like a mess in PvP.
I have absolutely no expectation that they are going to fix it, but hey, we're dreaming here on this episode, right? This is wish list.
Yeah, I'm just lamenting it. I'm just like, how do they get back to, you know, season 4 or whatever it was when like it was great. Like I remember loving it back then. And I mean, if we're think talking the powers has just gotten out of control and it's never going to happen again.
Yeah, I think if we're talking realistically, it's probably not going to happen, not just because the sandbox has sort of gotten away from them and they seem to have deprioritized it internally, but also because it seems that all of their major PvP talent have moved on to other games, right?
Marathon.
They're working on other Bungie projects. And so I think it's pretty clear. Yeah, I think they do have a strike team. That is true. I was happy to hear that. I think it's pretty clear that PvP is always going to be like a little side project, no matter how many times they get on a dev diary and tell me that they're reinvesting in it, which I've heard too many times.
Joe, we have a refocus on PvP.
Yeah, really, we're drilling down. We're going to be serious. Okay, Bungie.
Paul, what else do you think they should be working on?
This one's kind of simple. So my crusade against blues is over. I need to extend that now, however, to legendary world drop armor, which is essentially a blue. I've never played a game where it was like less interesting to pick up loot on the ground. I think that's like a more general problem with the game. It's either world drops that you see right away, it's exotic engrams now, which are supposed to go focus, or it's like 1810 prime engrams, and that's like essentially it. The world drop armor, it can't drop with good stats. Essentially, there's a hard cap on it that makes that impossible. I get how that would be sort of necessary for like a still leveling player or like a new player, but like blues, like when you hit the cap, like that just stops dropping. And I wouldn't just delete half the engrams. I would replace that with weapon drops, because world drop weapons, if they're good rolls, are notoriously hard to farm. And then I want to sort of extend this a little bit into, I think in specific activities where engrams drop, that weapons specific to those activities should drop every so often, rather than just every reward in these modes just relegated to the end chest. Like if you're playing, the Nightfall, like maybe sometimes an engram you pick up is another drop of the Nightfall weapon. Like, wow, would that kill you? Or like, the Vanguard Strike playlist weapons dropping in the strike as engrams rather than just from the end thing. Onslaught, maybe an engram you pick up in that. I mean, that is a ton of loot, so we're not really short on loot, but you get what I'm saying. Like, I think that they should be at least a little more generous and a little more spaced out in terms of how they dole out loot, instead of everything just being from a chest, crafting patterns, focusing engram, like all the stuff that is not really conducive to a traditional loot game where you are excited to pick up a drop, which I don't know, outside of like the raid exotics dropping from chests. Like do they even do that anymore? They just sort of appear. Outside of that happening, like it isn't a thing anymore. It's all, just end up chest things. So we'll drop armor and then sort of extend it to interesting drops in other ways.
I don't get very excited about drops anymore in Destiny. I totally agree with you on that. I got excited about the Thorn Catalyst that I finally got last night. I was like, oh my God, I got this. I got it. Wow. Okay. A few, like 10 seasons too late, but whatever. It was still nice. Yeah, I totally hear you on that. And I think you're kind of getting into something about Destiny where there's a lack of excitement for a lot of the things that we used to be like super stoked about. Think about Destiny 1 finally getting that Galahorn drop, or doing that that grind was pretty brutal, but when you finally got it, it was definitely a moment. There's tons of reaction gifs about getting exotics. Most of them are hidden behind quests or dungeons, and it does feel like almost like it's gotten a little bit too easy to get things. It's either too easy to get it, or it's like you have to defeat Oryx in the Kingfall raid to get Touch of Malice 900 times. It's like, all right, there's not really an in between. They're addressing it a little bit with Pantheon, to be fair, but I definitely hear you on all that.
I think you mean like randomness is what you're looking for. Like that was the thing with Gjallarhorn is you could get it anywhere. It was a world drop, to Paul's point, whereas like now all the important stuff there's a very specific way to get it or to grind it, and you're never really surprised when you get a drop. You're like, okay, yeah, that's how you get that. Yeah, you get the new exotic piece of armor by doing a master Lost Sector, and like you'll get it to pop 3 or 4 runs in, but you know exactly when and where.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
the problem is that's a result of player complaints where players wanted more direct, guaranteed ways to get stuff instead of randomness, which I get to a point, but now it's everything. You're right.
Yeah.
Like there's very
I think there
little
should
of
be
that
some
left except
randomness.
maybe raid exotics. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there should be some randomness, but generally I'm on the side of like, don't make me do a strike 50 times for a chance at getting something. Please make a way for me to like skill my way out of like having to grind all the time, because if you ask me to grind, I just won't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how they bring that magic back, honestly, because I do see both sides of it. So that one's tougher to address, I suppose. One that I don't feel like should be very tough to address is, I'm going to skip the second one I have on the run of show. I'm going to say the artifact grind. We kind of touched on it on the last episode. I think the artifact is dumb. I really don't like the artifact grind. I saw somebody wrote like 5 paragraphs about why I'm wrong. Why in the world would I want to do a bunch of random bounties where I have to use very specific weapons that I don't like to use to get my artifact up to level so that I can do endgame content? It is a very weird grind to me. I would rather be chasing drops in a specific slot than stacking bounties and turning bounties in masse, doing a bunch of random stuff that I don't particularly want to do, using guns I don't want to use. And the fact that that's the only way to level up the artifact is just silly. I think that entire system could be tremendously more interesting. And I think it should be put on the workbench, so to speak. And they have very talented developers at the company come up with something a little bit more fun than grab a bunch of bounties and turn them in, because so like your end game content is doing Grandmaster. And how do I get to do Grandmaster? By stacking bounties and doing the bounty farm. That doesn't really make any sense to me. So like that system just doesn't work. My gated entry into Grandmaster difficulty encounters shouldn't be doing something boring. Granted, the Fireteam leveling thing, I think does sort of address it, but it doesn't really address like why I have to grind the artifact up. I don't know. It's a weird system.
Do you mean the power level of the artifact or the perk unlocking?
Well, there's both. There's
right?
perk unlocking,
Perks are okay.
which is
I don't have a problem with the perks. I just wish
like
they'd
the
take away the
perks.
power level.
Yeah, but beyond the max power, the artifact power that it gives you, the way that you level that is by doing a bunch of random bounties, right? Or just things that give you XP. And the fastest best way to do that is by stacking a bunch of bounties and then just repeatedly doing bounties. There has to be
I never do that.
Other ways to do it.
Well, and I thought like because we're moving beyond seasons, we're moving to episodes. I'm like, okay, so the seasonal artifact is not going to exist. They're going to make some significant change. Like, does not appear to be happening. It seems like we're getting the exact same artifact in a lot of ways. Like maybe they'll call it the episodic artifact, but like that seems like one aspect of seasons that should have been changed in some way. And like they did the power grind, so like you still have to grind some power with every new season, even though they weren't raising the gear power cap. But like, yeah, you're right. The mechanism is totally pointless. That the most efficient way is just stacking bounties and doing, I guess now weekly challenges give a lot, but like it's very dull, and it seems very pointless to force people to do that to level up for high-end content every season. I don't get it.
It's really strange because like the path to get there, you have your regular drops that get you to the soft cap, and then you work to your pinnacle cap from there by getting drops in specific slots, and that's somewhat compelling. I think that could also go on the workbench. But then to get beyond the like absolute top level, you grind bounties. Like, really? That's
Do you know what the worst
methodology?
part
It's
is?
strange.
The worst part is that once you go through all that grinding, your reward is that you get to play Grandmaster Nightfalls.
Yeah.
An activity I do not want to play.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And please, oh man, maybe I should save Nightfalls for a general one, but I love having to use a bunch of crap guns to take out the champions in encounters. Wow, that's so fun. Thanks. Anyway,
You can get around champions now.
Yeah, you just
can
nuke them.
strand them up, and yeah.
But it's a silly system. Anyway, Travis, what's your next one?
My next one is story. I've been like one of those guys who has not really been a believer in Destiny's story for a really long time now. I say this as somebody who owns all the Grimoire books and reads them and really tries to engage with the lore. I'm like normally a really big lore guy, but Destiny is really trying with the lore, and I mean trying as in like difficult, not as in they are trying, because there's all these promises and build up, and we think that there's going to be something great around the corner. Gins us up and gets us all excited about the lore behind whatever we're learning about, and then we actually never really see that deliver in game. I would argue the only time we really have had payoff for like in-game Destiny lore where you were learning cool stuff about Destiny while you were playing it is in the Witch Queen, which for my money was the best story we've had in Destiny. I don't even think it's really close. And my concern has been within the seasons and expansion since then that the story has been on a pretty major decline, especially where the villain is concerned, the Witness, and that I'm a little worried that we are going to completely drop the ball with the final shape. And the reason that I think that's so important is because I think if they don't nail the story, people are just going to completely lose interest and possibly never come back to playing Destiny. I think there's a pretty good chance of that. And so I would just really like to see them refocus on the story in game. I'm not talking Grimoire entries. I'm not talking about descriptions that I can read inside of a in-game menu. I'm talking about like actually telling me what's going on in the game. And I think that the Witch Queen is a great model for doing that, because I think they got their plot across. They managed to pull off 2 twists in a short campaign, both of which were really, really compelling and interesting. And I think they need to stop treating the every gamer like they're stupid. They will skip the cutscene if they don't want to see it, but you should put effort and time to explain that stuff in the game if you can, because players appreciate it. I certainly do. I just want players to be rewarded for the 10 years, and I don't want them to continue to tickle us and say, oh, well, there's going to be payoff and there's a loose thread over there. Who knows what we're going to do with that? I think at one point in time I counted like 11 major plots that had been left on a cliffhanger and that we never got the payoff for.
Yeah.
And so I would just love that to not, I would love them to wrap everything up and put a little bow on it, at least for the vast majority of their loose threads.
I wholeheartedly agree.
The positioning of the story is the weird part. So like, it's the way they arrange it sometimes. Like the cutscene in the middle of Season of the Deep that explains like almost everything about the Witness and the Traveler's origin. That should have been the grand finale of Lightfall.
Yeah.
Why was that not? That would have almost made all of Lightfall worthwhile if we got that amount of explanation there. Or things like
the Veil audio logs, the 39 Veil audio logs
that had to be spaced
you
out over,
stand
over
at a
2
terminal
months,
and listen to. Sorry, Paul.
Yeah, that's
and they
one.
Still don't
no,
explain things.
That's one for sure. Sometimes it's what they don't show. Where in Season of the Witch, there was the thing where she summons Savathûn, she kills Savathûn. It's like a big moment in the cutscene, and then you have to like listen to Ikora and read that Savathûn got resurrected again, and she's wandering around somewhere. Like the biggest villain in Destiny history is now actually alive permanently and is wandering around somewhere. Like that is something we need to hear in the story directly, not like reading about it in a lore card. That kind of stuff. The positioning, even of what they do have, I think is one of the big problems too.
Yeah, absolutely agree with the storytelling stuff. I have I feel like I started talking about like Season 3 about the siloed nature of storytelling within Destiny, where like every season we get a story that doesn't really conclude in a incredibly meaningful way, and we're just left to wonder what happens, and then the next season comes and it's a totally new thread, and they just do that every time. It feels like there's 4 different story teams all telling a different story, and none of them have really come together well. Now, granted,
it feels like the story's being told by jazz musicians, and they're just kind of making it up as they go, right?
Yeah,
but that's going to be worse. That's going to be worse. The whole point of the episodes is that they're not connected. They're specifically not connected to each other, so you don't have to play them in order. Where they think they're solving a problem that people were complaining about, catching up for the story. But it's going to be exactly what you're saying, only more extreme. So I don't know if I agree with that philosophy. Yeah.
When you play like the Mass Effect trilogy, I know it's not a perfect example because the ending didn't like culminate in a perfect way, but there's a lot of side stories. There's individual connections that you make with the other characters, and there's always this overarching threat. In our instance, it's the Witness. But like, I don't know how Mithrax and the other characters that we've like, how is Eris Morn getting the abilities of a witch, Hive Witch, which she has now lost, going to play into the story about Cade's resurrection, right?
Really? You didn't like an entire season about Amanda dying for no reason?
Yeah, like, why did Amanda, like, that makes no sense. So, like, Amanda Holiday died. We're really sad about it anyway. Mithrax is here now.
I actually have a theory. Yeah. Do you guys want to hear my theory about why they killed off Amanda Holiday in a season?
A contract dispute?
I wonder if it is what I think it is. But yeah, I'm curious.
My theory is that they killed her off in a season because in the cutscene in Lightfall, it looks like she dies. And I think that they're writing one storyline for the people that only play expansions and then filling it in with details in the seasons. And so in Lightfall, if you aren't playing any of the seasons, you think Amanda's dead. And so I think somebody was like, all right, well, we have to do a season where we actually kill her then. That's
it's related to that. I think that's giving them too much credit. I think the original plan before Lightfall existed was to kill Amanda Holiday in that way in the opening as like a big shock moment. But then when they had the seasonal, year gap, they had to think of a way to kill her during the
you know what? I think that is actually correct.
I think that's what happened.
My reading of it was like, oh yeah, that scene, like the normies of who just play Destiny are gonna see that and be like, oh, so she's dead, right? And it's always weird when they do a cutscene like that and you assume that somebody's dead, and then later they bring them back and in like, because Destiny almost has like a main story and then an EU for all the nerds who are like reading all the extra lore and stuff. And it's just very weird to see them overlap in a way that's confusing to the average player. And then, it's just,
well, this was the theory that you can watch the first Lightfall cutscene and the last Lightfall cutscene.
Yep.
And just put them together. And there's nothing that needed to be in the middle because nothing we did in Lightfall was important.
Well, except for the 39 audio logs about the veil. Don't forget
but they made up the veil again.
We could have cut the veil entirely.
This is all jazz. That's what I'm telling you. They're just making it up as they go.
Yeah, and having listened to those audio logs recently, that's actually an interesting story. And Paul, I know you were like, you have to go do this. I'm so glad I didn't, because you can just go listen to them all now and get it all in one go. But yeah, the fact that was not at all told during the campaign of Lightfall is insane to me. Paul, back
it's not even that interesting for the plot. It's more interesting for all the Lakshmi 2 stuff. Like, it's just an interesting sort of side story. Like, you kind of learn more about.
Oh, she's kind of evil. Like, it's really compelling.
That was the more interesting part. Okay. So my last one, I'm going to change it because this was mentioned, but I didn't put it in the article. Something has to change with the armor mod system because they just made it worse and boring, and now everybody has to run like the same stuff essentially in PvP mods for this, PvE mods for this. Like,
resilience.
You need your weapon surges, you need your resistances. You're just playing the little double triple hundreds number with your stats, and like you need orb generate. Like, there's not enough diversity, and this whole like basing it around armor charge. It's you're getting what, your weapon surge, maybe one and a half other bonuses from armor charge.
Weapon and armor surges, yeah.
It's such a dull, stripped down system. And like, granted, the other system wasn't perfect. Elemental Wells got too strong. Charge with Light wasn't useful enough broadly. And then Warmind cells were fun, actually, once they got rolling, and then they were never developed again. I'm not saying you have to go back to those exact 3 ones, but like, armor mods are just not remotely interesting. And I think they've gotten better at like weapon perks. Like, we have a lot of new weapon perks that have sort of evolved the sandbox in that way, but armor armor's nothing. Armor hasn't changed in forever. They've streamlined it, which some people are requesting. Like there's no elemental affinity, which like I think that was a good change, but there's no reason to have more than like 2 full sets of armor. Really, you can get artifice armor for some bonus stats. There's no reason to do anything really even remotely creative with armor mods. Just there's pretty basic templates of what you are supposed to do for which activity or which build, and like there's no creativity there. I feel like all the creativity now is just in subclass aspects and fragments, and then your exotic choice, and everything else is just like armor exists to exist, but it's been like kind of heavily neutered, in the last couple of years.
Yeah,
set bonuses.
Yeah, something like that would be sort of cool. They have perks on like Iron Banner Gear. You get more Ascendant prismatic shards, or like the gold currency that looks like a spike. Yeah, I don't even know what they're called.
They've tried to do that. Like with the seasonal armor, it's like, oh, each piece gets you 5% more XP gain in the event, but like none of those have been.
Nobody cares.
So I have
remotely interesting. Like I'm not going to masterwork a whole new subpar armor set just to get that bonus.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm talking about gameplay bonuses. Like everyone else does.
Yeah.
Like there needs to be specific things that pieces of armor make you better.
Which elemental siphon do you choose? Like that's what I always ask my friends. Like when I meet somebody who plays Destiny, I'm like, hey, what's your favorite elemental siphon? Because it's a super compelling, interesting conversation about the armor system. I'm being sarcastic because it's silly. You just put on whatever you happen to need for your build. That's a good call, Paul. I think for me, one thing, just general malaise. It feels like a lot of the systems have become very tiring. They're changing up the seasonal model, which is good, but we've already outlined why that could be problematic in terms of storytelling. The armor chase is not really that compelling. The unlock chase every season is like just whatever. There's a lack of excitement. And I think even as a new player, it's a multifaceted problem. As a new player, you're so overwhelmed with whatever the heck is going on in this game. Most players are just going to dip out. Like it's not particularly easy to understand, and it's not particularly fun to do these things. So you're seeing a lot of new players come in and just be like, well, this is very complicated. The onboarding process isn't great. I don't really find this to be all that fun. I'm just going to bounce. So like that could also be attributed to the fact that the storytelling for a new player is just weird. You sign on Lightfall, you're like, what the hell is going on? Like I have no frame of reference for anything that's happening right now. So there's a lot of problematic nature there. And I think there is a general fatigue and malaise that would need to be addressed with like a massive overhaul. You can't just be like, oh, we fixed the armor system, right? It has to be like a Destiny 3 level thing to sort of reset everything. And we kind of talked about that rumor a few episodes ago. So general malaise is a huge problem with the Destiny franchise. And I do worry, as Travis and Paul, you've alluded to throughout the episode, that after a final shape, there could be a just catastrophic player drop off. So I think that's one of the more important things that needs to be addressed. And that's not an easy one, because you've made all these systems over years and years and years. And the problem is the systems are becoming very grindy and not as fun and not as interesting as even vanilla Destiny was. That's my 2 cents on it. And Travis.
Yeah, so completing my trifecta of unrealistic requests from Bungie, whether it's revising PvP, making a good story, I am now going to hit you where it hurts in the wallet and say that you really need to look at your monetization model. This kind of relates to part of what Paul was saying at the top, which was about their transmog. Transmog is like just one way they charge players that I often forget about because I don't play Destiny at all, because I look like I ran through a wardrobe in a cartoon chase sequence and came out on the other side wearing whatever I happened to run through. But it is part of how they charge you, right? Mm-hmm. They also charge you for cosmetics in the Eververse store. They also charge you for season passes. They also charge you for expansions. They also charge you for event cards. Like
dungeon keys.
Every dungeon
which
keys,
is insane.
every possible avenue of making you pay money is in Destiny, and they have not ever looked at that and readjusted. It is crazy to me, because if you look at Destiny without knowing, if you were like, hey Travis, you play hundreds of games every year for work, what it like, look at Destiny, tell me what type of game it looks like. I would say this looks like a free to play game with no charge for the expansions or the seasonal content, but you're selling premium season passes, you're selling Eververse cosmetics, you've got transmog, people are paying for, you're kind of giving them like this piecemeal experience. And it's crazy that it's not that kind of game, given how many times they charge you. They charge you at every single monetization model is represented in Destiny in some way, which is crazy. It's just wild. I guess except for subscription. That's the only thing they haven't done yet. But yeah, I would just say they really need to look at that. I would fully expect Destiny 3 to have a different model. I don't know if it even makes sense at this point for them to charge for a Destiny 3, or if it should just be a free-to-play game. Or if it's not a free-play game, if you're going to make me pay $60, $100 for every expansion, then remove some of the scummy stuff in the game that makes it feel like less of a premium experience.
Dungeon keys should not be charged for it. That one's just ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's like a step too far.
Dungeon keys is weird. I would say transmog is weird, even though it's an area I don't particularly care about or am affected by. I still think it's weird. I think the event cards is weird because it sort of makes the entire event not worth playing unless you it's just like, okay, so it's a free to play event, but not really, because if you want any actual incentive to play it, you have to buy this ticket or whatever. So yeah, there's just way too much that they're charging us for in this game, and I would just really want them to reevaluate when they do Destiny 3 or even sooner.
Yeah, I do agree that the monetization structure is problematic in a way that negatively impacts the gameplay just generally. Paul, any final thoughts before we head out?
I mean, I could go on forever, but that's probably good for now.
Yeah. So just fix the armor system. Gun system's pretty good. Like, there's interesting guns.
I'm fine with guns right now. I think guns are doing pretty well.
Yeah, but give us a way to imprint those or something, and not just the ones with patterns. Like, put a pattern, figure something out. Are you doing collections? Or are you doing patterns? Like, pick one, pick a lane, make it standard, and let's go. You know, artifact, monetization, just fix the whole game. That's it. That's our feedback. Thanks for listening, Bungie. Easy. We appreciate you very much. Thank you so much, Paul, Travis. This has been a good episode. I said shorter, but I think it was actually ended up being a longer one. It was more of a little bit of a venting session for all of us, but sometimes that's what we need. Hopefully Bungie can take it into consideration and maybe make some positive changes over the coming years. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thank you, Paul and Travis. Until next time, everybody, Guardians out.
Guardians out.